Yeah, I wanted to speak with everyone tonight about a topic that is very dear to my heart, a very simple topic, a very topic that I believe is about touches on the fundamentals of healing, of resilience, of being authentic, being real with ourselves, and that's the topic of vulnerability. As the name suggests, I think it was very long-winded, cultivating vulnerability in relationships, in the times of the Omer or whatever exactly was written in the flyer. Uh, and this is such a fundamental topic for our healing and for relationships in general. Why? And of course, everything starts with ourselves. So first, what I would like to do tonight is talk about, do this type of thing, how it applies to ourselves, and then how it applies to relationships. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about psychologically, emotionally, practically, and in the end, hopefully Kabbalistically, about where some of these ideas are, and some of these truths, I would say, are rooted in. So, especially during nowadays with everything going on in the world and just all the pain and suffering that people feel, and it seems that it's a trend, as they call it, the silent sufferer, and so many people suffer in silence and they don't open up to other people and talk about, their struggles, and everyone on their own level, everyone knows the pains of their own hearts. So one of the major things that stop us from opening up to other people is really shame. When we find ourselves put in positions or doing things that are either against our will, against our values, and shame is one of the things that actually stops our self-worth from coming out. We feel, who am I to say things? We feel embarrassed. We feel we feel ashamed of, why am I not where I'm supposed to be in life, or why am I addicted to this thing, or these different events that happen to me, or why am I not married yet? And that shame, that feeling of shame, is really something that keeps a person down. And the more we suffer in silence, actually, the more shame grows. So shame actually grows in silence, right? The more you keep that secret in, the more you don't face that shame, the less real and authentic you are with yourselves, the more that shame seems to grow and grow and grow and grow. I kind of have like this image almost of like, I was never too into vampire movies or anything like that. If I remember these comics I read about vampires, and when you'd expose them to the sun, they'd be like, you know? So it's the same thing with shame. When we expose our shame and we let go of that secret and we acknowledge that secret, that shame, first inwards to ourselves, and then being able to share that with someone else and being vulnerable in order to open up and share, that is the sunlight, so to speak, that actually stops the shame from growing and growing and growing and growing. And really, in order to do that, it takes a tremendous amount of courage and vulnerability, right? Because what happens is, when we're feeling these feelings, we dress ourselves up with our defense mechanisms, the proverbial armor. And what we need to start to do is, not only in dating, not only beyond dating and marriage, not only in our small societies, but in the world at large, we need to start working towards what I like to think of an open heart. you know, when we open up our hearts towards the world around us and we put down our weapons of defense mechanisms, our weapons of protection, our weapons of cynicism, and it actually comes out to be a catch-22. Why? Because we want to protect ourselves so we can now not get hurt and enter into relationships with other people without being hurt. But what happens is, it's actually the defense mechanisms and the proverbial emotional armor that we wear that actually stops us and hinders those relationships with other people. And there was a very from one of the early humanist psychologists. His name was, I don't know if anyone knows, this is my particular topic of interest. Uh, there was one of the early humanist psychologists, his name was Rollo May. And Rollo May used to talk about having courage in the face of vulnerability. Means he wasn't saying, don't be insecure, or don't feel that feeling of, oh, I have to put my defense mechanism down, or I have to have some sort of negative disclosure, and we'll come back to that. But feeling that afal pikein, even in that place of being scared, of being fearful, of being nervous, if I let this person in, if I disclose certain things about myself, even so, sharing, having courage in the face of vulnerability, right? And that's really when a person's able to not only cultivate a relationship with others, but first and foremost with themselves, right? Because again, here's where the shame thing comes in. And I want to talk about shame a little bit because it's it's often overlooked. Some people feel overt shame in their lives, but shame is one of these things. I think of it like on my fence, there's these like ivy that grows and it like takes over, you know? And shame is actually so insidious. It's so it's so damaging that a person is doing life on the level of shame and they don't even realize. So, right. So whether it comes to their career, they'll only operate right underneath the barrier of success. They'll never actually do the things that they want to do because they're ashamed and they're feeling insecure. They're feeling unworthy because it's the shame that disempowers a person and erodes away at their being and at their self-worth, right? So a person doesn't even realize that they're doing it, because it could be so sneaky when it comes to relationships, right? A person has different things in their lives that they're not proud of, right? So sometimes it's very conscious. We all have conscious things, but we often have very subtle, sneaky things like ivy that have tainted our lenses, and we're doing life on the level of shame. We're not fully engaging in relationships. We're not fully embracing our vulnerabilities. We're not fully putting down our armor, our defense mechanisms in order to let people in. It's like, and I would even go even further to say that, the shame of, will I ever be loved? Am I lovable? Will other people like me? Can I love myself? How can I come to terms with the different things in my life, right? And I know this is GamZuli, I'm speaking, so I'm gonna connect it to relationships and dating, but it certainly goes beyond that, right? When we're eroding ourselves because we feel unlovable, it's actually the very fact that we're shaming ourselves and doing that is the very thing that stops our self-worth from manifesting and coming out. That when we're able to be vulnerable and embrace that, yes, I feel that I might not be lovable. Yes, I feel inadequate. Yes, I feel incapable or unprepared or deeply wounded or hurt. But even so, I'm going to put my best foot forward, right? And I'm going to try in order to engage in a relationship. I'm going to try to do things that I feel deeply inadequate able to do. And the first step of that, of allowing the worth to arise from within themselves, is acknowledging the shame which is keeping a person down. And that requires a person to be real with themselves, to be vulnerable with themselves, to be authentic with themselves, right? It's like I often think about, like, it's so easy to fall into the illusion of blaming people for the negative aspects of our life. But when we look deeper within ourselves and the more honest, authentic, and real we are with ourselves, the more all the illusion, I would say, that other people are responsible for our emotional world and well-being really begins to fall away. And only then can we really start being authentic, real, and vulnerable with other people around us, right? If you can't do it with yourself, you can't do it with somebody else, right? To the level that you could do it inwards is the level you'll be able to manifest that and share your inner world, your sense of being, to be able to take those risks of disclosing things about yourself or doing things that you wouldn't ordinarily do with other people. right? So, um, as you know, again, I keep talking around this thing. It's really such a simple thing, it's not rocket science, as they say, but people really don't fully appreciate the amount of shame that they carry with them. In fact, shame and fear are the greatest barriers for connection, and vulnerability and empathy are really the antidotes, right? When a person feels shame and a person feels fear, that stops them from being vulnerable. But vulnerability, right? Overcoming that shame and being vulnerable and empathic is really the antidote, right? It's like instead of closing our hearts, I like to think of opening our hearts, you know? And I think this is particularly, it's hard for anyone, I know I was talking to my wife about some of the things that I wanted to share tonight with everyone, and she told me a story about Brene Brown. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Brene Brown, who is talks about shame and vulnerability till forever, And my wife told me this story that someone asked Brene Brown that they're like, when they asked her personally, when do you practice this? And she answered perfectly. It's like so perfect. She says, every moment of my life, right? There's always this choice. Am I going to be vulnerable? Am I going to be authentic? Am I going to be real with myself and those around us, right? Am I going to put down my defense mechanisms and my armor or right, and act with vulnerability and empathy? Or am I going to fall back into cynicism and sarcasm and nihilism and fatalism, and this isn't going to work out, or I'm not good enough, self-loathing and feeling deeply insecure, right? So it's not that you have to feel secure, but is the vulnerability is the thing that allows you to go forward, like I was saying from Rollo May, in the face of insecurity, right? It's like Rabbi Nachman always says, Afal Pikain, even so, or Daika, from within itself, right? From within the space of insecurity, within the space of fear, to be a player, an active player in your own life, to march forward with vulnerability and empathy, really having the courage. That's the word I was looking for. Courage, right? To have the courage to be vulnerable, to have the bravery to be vulnerable, right? It's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. I play several instruments, and one of the things I always think to myself, there's a joke they say about guitar players. And they say, how many guitar players does it take to change a light bulb? And they say, it takes 10, one to do it, and the rest to stand around and say, I could have done that. I could do that. I don't know. I can't say to its face that of 30 musicians there, right? It's very easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. I could do that. I could have done that if that was me, right? But if you're not vulnerable by playing the game, so to speak, if you're not willing to be an active participant in the things that you want to do, in the relationships that you would like to cultivate, right? If you're not willing to face your shame and be real and authentic with yourself, right? Then you fall back to, I could do that. I could do that, right? What's the big deal? I could change that, right? It's like, and it's again, this is so fundamental. It's so fundamental. And it's really an amazing thing, And I wanted to continue to develop this idea a little bit. What we're talking about here is, it's the shame that really blocks our worth from coming out, and then we wind up doing life and ourselves and relationships on a significantly lower level. And like I was saying before, is one of the antidotes to this. I'm sure there are many antidotes to this. Not only what I'm saying here tonight, but you could fill up a book of self-help library of just based on this topic alone, of the amount of research and everything that's got into it. But one of the things that I see which is practical and helps, aside from being self-effacing and being vulnerable, of course, that's practical, is there's of something that I like to call, especially when it comes to relationships, there's an idea called empathic listening. Empathic listening was actually originally started by Carl Rogers, again, one of the early humanist psychologists. And Carl Rogers used to talk about empathic listening. And if I had a video, I would show it, but anyone could Google Rogers and Carl Rogers and empathic listening. And, and what he says is empathic listening is really something that requires a person to leave their world and really journey with someone else, right? That I'm listening to your world and I'm not just thinking of my own thoughts when I'm listening I mean, I happen to be a therapist, but whether it's with my clients, but it's really true for other relationships as well, and my intimate relationships of uh it's not just I'm listening to my own thoughts or practicing the moves in order to, like, okay, I say yes 3 times and I say, okay, would you like a Coke? Yes, I'll have the Coke. And there's this rehearsed dance that we all sometimes fall into with certain things. I'm happy I see a laugh over your smile. I could gauge where some people are. This kind of rehearsed type of thing. And empathic listening is really when you leave your own world and you journey into someone else's world and you're there delicately as a spectator, respectfully listening, being attuned to those subtle feelings and emotions, even if you vastly disagree with what the person's saying. It's still called empathic listening, listening from a place of empathy from a place of neutrality, not a place of judgment. And the truth is that requires a tremendous amount of vulnerability, right? Because only someone who's secure with themselves can leave their world and enter someone else's world. If you're not secure with yourself, if you're not comfortable with yourself, you get lost in someone else's world. And one of the things that I do, I teach as a professor for YU, the Sarashner Wurzweiler program. One of the things I like to show some of the students in the beginning of the semester is there's if anyone seen Ferdinand, the cartoon Ferdinand, the movie, it's about the bull. He's like this gentle bull, and there's one scene in the movie where he gets stung by a bee. And as the old adage is, like a bull in a china shop, he runs into this china shop because he got triggered by this bee, and there's glass all over the place. And he says to himself, "Think skinny," and he's trying not to break the glass and trying not to run amok in the china shop, and eventually he lets out and he destroys everything, but he's good for a little bit, but that's really a perfect metaphor for empathic listening and empathy, which is you can't go into someone else's world and now run amok. You can't go into someone else's world, right? The idea of empathic listening is going into someone's world and being respectful of their world, not like the bull in the china shop where that just destroys everything, right? And that really takes a tremendous amount of vulnerability when either you're out on a date, or even for those, I know there's some people already married on this call, even when you're listening to your wife and with your children and really in all your relationships that you really want to cultivate a sense of intimacy and vulnerability, because you might get it wrong, right? If I'm listening very deeply to someone and you're entering someone else's wrong, you might misunderstand. They might reject you because you might suggest something and they be like, nah, not true. Nah, exactly. Oh, you look like the type of person who like, no, dead wrong. You're right. You could be wrong, and putting aside your own assumptions and putting down your own defense mechanisms and putting down your own judgments requires vulnerability, right? It requires realness. It requires a person to be authentic with themselves, you know? And really that is the key, the foundation, I would say, of self-growth, right? We're talking about growing during the Omer, right? The key to any real change is the ability to be honest with yourself and to be authentic and stop the defense mechanisms of self-protection. And those are many. I don't think I need to enumerate all the different types of defense mechanisms that there are in the world, the illusions, the denial, the repression, the the sadness, the distractions that people experience, on a daily basis. But I also would like to talk about, a little bit about empathy and sympathy. Just I think it's worthy to say a word on that. Like sympathy is listening with judgment. Like it's like I feel bad for you. Like poor guy. Like imagine someone falls in a pit and you're standing on top of the pit and you're like, told you so. Like man, told you not to walk in the pit. Like I feel sorry for you. Feel very sorry that you fell in the pit. Must be the pits. I know it's terrible, right? You fell in the pit, right? Right. Oh, I feel terrible for you, right? Empathy is when you're in the pit with the person and you're like, I'm here for you. You know, I can't believe you had to go through this. Tell me, what was that like? How did that feel for you? Right. And certainly I'm bringing it back to dating tonight because that's to do with GamZuli, that is, Rav Matt's specialty. You know, uh, it's, when you're out with someone and the person looks a certain way, or you don't like their voice, or you don't like they smell, or they look funny, or they look from a different background than you, and you're like, what? I wasn't expecting this, right? Boom, vulnerability, empathy, right? Quiet, deep listening, empathic listening, right? It takes courage in the face of insecurity in order to say, I'm going to enter this person's world. I'm going to hear what this person has to say, right? I want to cultivate vulnerability and empathy in the relationship. And that requires me first to acknowledge, yes, I'm being judgmental right now. Yes, I'm having preconceived notions right now. Yes, I'm like seething on the inside because this is the millionth time that I got set up with a person like this that I didn't want, or that I wasn't interested in, or I thought it was going to be, and this didn't work out, and the shotgun told me, and even beyond what all the different complications and intricacies and delicacies that happen, and it requires you to really practice empathy, right? To practice vulnerability, to say, I'm going to show up in the best version of myself that I can right now, right? I'm going to suspend my judgments for a little bit. I'm going to face my shame, right? What's the shame? This is the fifth time this person set me up like this. Don't they get it? What do they think I am, right? All sorts of stories come out, you know? And again, this goes beyond dating. This is in all aspects of life and marriage also, right? To really not go in with your preconceived judgments and notions and really drop that and work towards having the courage uh, in the face of vulnerability, have the courage in the face of shame, being real, authentic with yourself, and working towards opening up your heart. That's what I would say. I used to say, open up your heart. But then someone said, that's really hard. I can't just open up my heart like that. So I said, okay, working towards open up your heart, right? Making that decision to be every day showing up to your life and making that decision towards, I'm going to be authentic with myself. I'm going to be real with myself, right? I'm going to have courage today in the face of insecurity, in the face of uncertainty, right? I'm going to cultivate that with myself and of course with those around us. So if you would think of it like, and again, people shouldn't get the wrong idea per se, like it doesn't mean that you go out with someone and now you completely self-disclose every negative thing about yourself, right? Like, okay, vulnerability, some people get around, now I have to spill my guts to every single person I meet, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that, at all, right? But what it means is that, let's say you're at a gumball, right? And you're going out with someone, you're cultivating a relationship with someone, So if you had a gumball machine and every time you practiced vulnerability and courage and authenticity, you were now putting a gumball into the machine, right? And you self-disclose a little more and more and more and more and more. And you practice more negative self-disclosure and more negative self-disclosure and more other things about yourself, right? And you add the gumballs in, right? And now what's cultivated in front of you is an authentic, vulnerable, real relationship with the human being on the other side, right? It's not just, okay, now I did it, right? It's a healthy relationship. It's a relationship based on trust and respect, based on vulnerability and courage. Now, I'd like to shift gears a little bit to talk about how some of this applies to Sphira Kabbalistically, some amazing things as well. During Sphira, this plays right into it. It's really, this occurred to me today as I was thinking about what to share with everyone. And this occurred to me that, it's brought down in the Kabbalistic sources that, where it's called Sfiras HaOmer, right? So I'm sure many of you here are familiar with, that there are something called 10 Sfiras, and there are 7 Sfiras. 7 times 7 is 49. It's the 4950 days between Pesach and Shavuos. And every one of these days, every one of these weeks corresponds to a different Sfira, right? There's a, if I don't know the audience exactly, but we'll consider these Sfiras like building blocks or like energy balls, just balls of energy, and uh, so there is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. There are 7. The names aren't important for right now. And again, much ink has been spilt on this topic. But it's brought in the Kabbalistic sources that it says, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashemayim ve'es haaretz. In the beginning, Hashem created the heaven and the earth, right? Heavens and earth. Ve'aretz haisa tohu v'vahu. And v'choshek al pnei tahom. So right away, the creation opens up and the world is filled with tohu vavohu, chaos and darkness fills everything, right? I think I created the world, create the sunshine, I create all these things, right? You think that would be like a perfect way to create the world, but in God's world works a little bit differently. That's the one we all live in. We open up the creation story and what happens? Chaos. There's darkness. There's like pain and suffering and gullus and exile and self-exile. And there's just a lot of seemingly negativity. So the Kabbalistic sources explain what was going on here. There was something called a Shviras HaKelim, a shattering of the vessels, which is why the world opens up to darkness. That Hashem, when he created the world, he had these spheres, these vessels, and he wanted to fill these vessels with light and goodness. But what happened? Too much light got put into these vessels, and these vessels crashed. They shattered. They broke. They were destroyed, right? And then our Torah opens up with our world that there was a shattering. Yes, there was a shattering, but now we're working in tikkun. We're working in correction, right? There was day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and the rest of the Torah, kind of as we know it. So this is an amazing thing. I saw this explained from Reb Nassan of Breslov, one of Rabbi Nachman's main students. It's an astounding thing that I saw that he writes, and he says, what happened? Why did these vessels break in the beginning? He says, you know why? Because they weren't vulnerable with one another. Each vessel thought that I could hold all the light myself. I don't need anyone or anything else because of me, right? It was like they were egocentric vessels, right? I could contain it all myself. I could handle life by myself. I could handle my problems by myself. I could handle myself by myself. I don't need help from a single keli, from a single vessel. I don't need help from anyone, right? And what happened when they were in this egocentric mindset, these vessels? They took in too much light and they exploded. They shattered, right? So what did Hashem do after, right? This happened. He created a system where all these vessels, they need to now be interdependent on one another. They all need each other's help because I'll give light and that water will flow into a cup of overflow and it will be received by cups underneath it. And that water will spill into that water, into those cups, it will fill up and it will be received by cups underneath it, right? So Hashem created a system where the kalim, the spheres themselves, needed to be vulnerable with one another to say, I can't handle this all on my own. I can't take all the light myself because if I do, I break, right? So in the creation, in the foundation of the creation of the world, right? When Hashem is now setting up the Olam Atikan, the world of fixing, the world that we live in, the world where we're picking up all the sparks that happened from the shattering, Hashem set vulnerability in the world, that all these vessels and all mankind and everyone needs one another. We need to be interdependent and interlocked in one another, that we can now hold light, right? And the more vulnerable that we are and we let go of the shame and the guilt and the toxicity and the ego, which the shame, stirs up the shame, right? And the cynicism. right? So the more we create this space and this perfect flow for life and light and relationships to enter into our lives, into our world. So it's really an astounding thing how these vessels needed to be vulnerable towards one another in order that the world of Tikkun, the world of proper order, should be, right? But when they said I could do it on my own, right? Right, I got this. I don't need anyone else, right? I don't need to be vulnerable. I could handle everything. I could do everything. I don't need to open up to the person next to myself. Then, and we all know that, right? We all know that when we're suffering in our own heart and we don't open up, we don't let out the seltzer from the seltzer bottle, that air, we don't let it out, we begin to explode. So it's precisely that mindset, that attitude, that understanding that we're talking about, that we take with us, as well as these practical things, to understand that vulnerability and authenticity and realness is really at the bedrock of creation and is at the bedrock of forming healthy, long-standing, and vibrant relationships.
Wow, Rav Shaya, thank you so much. At this time, I hope yes, you were
No,
done. You
no,
were about.
I said my piece. Any questions? If anyone has questions, comments,
Please,
letter to the editors.
please feel free to chime in. Please feel free to comment. I encourage you to show your face if you feel comfortable enough. If not, that's okay too. And any questions that you had, direct towards our Rav Shaya. Well, Shai, I'm going to jump in here because yeah, I was taking notes here on the side, and I know you mentioned this at the very beginning, but please, like I almost I needed to be in the question a little bit more, but you gave beautiful answers. Where's the shame coming from initially? Again, yes, I'm not a saint by any means. I have my negative traits. I have things that I do that I know that I need to work on. Uh, But now, where's my shame? I guess where does that grow from? Explain to me where that originates from,
Sure.
please.
Shame comes from, Rav Matt, I see you're very smart because I actually didn't talk about that. That could be a whole nother topic in its own right. But quite simply put, shame comes from when we act against our values and our ideals. That we have certain values, we have certain beliefs, we have certain things that we want to accomplish in life. And when we fail to reach those values or act against them, sometimes even in abhorrent ways, uh, that's not always the case. But when we fail to act towards the things that we want to act, our ideals and our morals, and certainly if we act against them, that's what I'm saying, right? The the experience of shame begins to arise within a person. So for example, I can give examples, right? For example, let's say let's say a person, I don't know, we could really take anything. Let's take learning for a second, Rob Matt. I know you like to learn Torah. So a person says, I want to be a big Talmud Chacham and a tzaddik and a scholar. And that's really something they hold very, very valuable, right? And now they don't. They find themselves night after night wasting their time, distracted with life, potchking, watching YouTube, Netflix, Instagram, right? So now the feeling of shame starts to come in, right? What am I doing with myself? Why am I doing these things? Why am I not actualizing the potential and doing the things that I feel that I'm really supposed to be doing, right? And you see what happens is that's the cycle of, there actually is a healthy shame. We didn't really get into it tonight, but that type of shame erodes a person's self-worth, right? Because this is how it works, right? It's so disempowering. Why? Because you're like, I want to be doing these things. I'm such a loser. I want to be doing these things. I'm not. So I feel terrible about myself. Oh, you see, you feel terrible. I said, that's because you're a loser. I have proof that you're a loser. You know what the proof is? You're not doing the things that you want to be doing. Right? So you see, it's this toxic shame that really spirals a person downwards and erodes their self-worth. That's why one of the remedies, one of the antidotes to self-worth is exposing it, right? Being honest, real, and authentically facing that shame, right? And breaking the cycle of toxic shame. I see another one. Hashem brings us a reality that matches up with our inner world to help us see what needs to be worked on within us. Yes, that's I definitely agree with that statement that we're constantly being shown, we live, I mean, this is really a little bit of a different topic, but we live in an inside out world, like our experience of life is being created through us. It's not, so it's like, it looks like it's coming at us. So like, we're really shown the things that we need to work on. Like the Baal Shem Tovs, there's a famous metaphor. They say like, and there's so many metaphors for this. This is just, 10 just flashed through my mind, but one of them that's coming to me is that there was a woman in her kitchen, right? And there was someone else doing the laundry outside and hanging their clothing on the clothing line, right? And the person was looking, and she kept thinking to herself, there are stains all over the clothing. How does she do the laundry? She's hanging up dirty laundry. I can't believe it. And this went on for months, that she was thinking, beside herself, she shouldn't be hanging up the dirty laundry. Like, what's up with that, And then finally she realized her window was dirty, right? And it's the same thing, that we're shown the thing, we see ourselves in real time projected out into the other world, right? If you take a light and you put film and run it through a projector, that light now illuminates the movie in front of us. So too, our experience of reality is coming via the projector, our consciousness and our well-being, that we have a feeling, we have a sense, we have thoughts, and that now gets illuminated to the world we see in front of ourselves. So we're certainly see our feelings in real time and the things that we need to work on that Hashem is showing us. I understood the question very well. Like, why is that you attract what you really are and not what you want to be? Like, I'm just reading what was written over here. Like, I want to attract what I want to be, not what I'm currently doing or exposing myself. Rebecca isn't, oh, they're different. Sorry, I'm not going to mention names if they're, I don't know, is this a public chat or is this a,
No, yeah, so should I? That was answering or trying to clarify the question that we originally had. So I think the question, at least the way that it's being understood in this little chat here, is, hey, I want to be a huge Talmud Chacham. I want to be a big, like great individual, right? But I'm not that. So why is it that
yeah.
I'm manifesting a reality that's not what I actually want?
Well, okay, so there could be multiple reasons for that, certainly the first word that comes to mind is trauma, and pain and shame, definitely a person could have a shame response to trauma, that a person really doesn't experience their self-worth, right? If you really, really, really experienced your worth, you would be working towards those things, right? No one just ends up with a big business overnight. Like, generally speaking, that doesn't happen. No one ends up to be a Talmud Chacham overnight. No one ends up, right? It takes hard work day after day of you showing up, being vulnerable, doing it, even if you don't feel like doing it, right? The daily grind, as they say, right? But if you don't feel worthy enough deep in your heart of hearts that you have the right to something, that you are worth it, to be able to aim for that, right? Because you're ashamed or you're traumatized, or, there could be a lot of different reasons, so you'll never actually work towards that thing. You'll just always sit back, run yourself down with more shame, and never manifest the thing that you want to manifest. So it's not necessarily that you're attracting negativity, but people have wounds and we have scars and we have difficult circumstances. I'm sure everyone in this group could write a book on their own struggles, and because that we don't fully believe that we're worthy enough in order to shoot for the things that we want to do. So that's what I was saying originally, like, so then we do life on a lower level. We don't actually work towards attaining the things that we want to attain. There was a YouTuber that I like, maybe some of you know him, his name was Matt Diavella, and he does mental health videos and things like that. And he opened up Academy for teaching other people how to make YouTube videos. I never did it, but I love the name. He called it Slow Growth Academy. That's what he called his academy for teaching other YouTubers, Slow Growth Academy. And I think that's just a fantastic name, like slow and steady. But at the foundation of that is worth, right? Again, if you don't really believe that you're worthy and you're constantly disempowering yourself, right, with shame and toxic shame of I want to do this, but I'm not doing it. So look at me, poor me, I'm a loser. No, I can't really do it. I want to accomplish this. I want to accomplish that. I want to build this relationship. I want to give it, but I'm not really worthy to get married. I'm not really lovable. I'm not really able to, I'm not, so then you're running yourself down, right? So something else. Because we have fears, opposing desires. People are putting in the comments, yes, 100%. That's all true. Uh, Fears, anxieties, attachments, enmeshments, unhealthy enmeshments, unhealthy attachments, right? But this shame piece is how can we work on self-worth? Well, what I would say is that's, again, much ink has been spilled on that question, but what I would say very simply in line with what they're saying is that if you'd stop shaming yourself organically, your worth would already start arising from within itself, right? There's nothing really you need to do to work on. It's not like worth isn't something outside of yourself, right? It's not found in a book, it's not found in accomplishments, right? It's so funny how much we shame ourselves, right? If think about this, everyone could do this exercise on their own, right? I'll be successful when. Everyone just fill in that blank in their mind, right? I'm sure everyone just had that, whatever they filled it in with, different for everyone here, right? I'll be successful when, right? You don't really, right? How about you're successful now? You're already worthy, right? That shows the shame, right? I'm not really successful. I'm not really worthy. I'm not really valid, or a mandamar or have the say, right? I'll be successful when I reach that point, I'll be, meaning to say I'm not worthy now. Right? So we chase this illusion of success, trying to cultivate our self-worth as if it's something outside ourselves. But like Rabbi Nachman said, he says, it's funny, Rabbi Nachman wasn't the only one to say this. Eckhart Tolle says this, Rabbi Nachman says this, other Chassidish Sfarim say this, right? If you look at any basic self-help book nowadays, will say, Rabbi Nachman said it 200 years ago, which is fantastic, but, this thing that Rabbi Nachman said, everyone has a Nakuda Tova, meaning to say everyone has a deeper nature, right? Our essential selves is, you could call it the soul, you could call it consciousness, you call it the neshama, you call it Nakuda Tova, you call it well-being, you could call it self-esteem, you could call it resilience, you could call it whatever you want. There's many terms to describe the same thing, right? But bottom line is every single one of us, every person on earth, I believe, has a deeper nature, and when we're connected to that worth, our deeper nature, it becomes we start doing life on that level. We start working towards the relationships that we want. We start working towards the things that we want to accomplish in life, and that's different, right? Someone wrote, I'm already worthy and successful, but isn't enough for what I need in the place I'm currently at. That's the way I view myself. Is this too called shame? So again, I don't know if these aren't public comments, are they, Rav Matt? Oh, they are?
Yeah, I believe they are in public comments.
Oh,
It's to
okay,
the
yeah.
group.
Well,
It's to the
I would
group.
say, look, I don't know you who wrote the comment, so I couldn't be able to assess that, to be honest. Like that would depend. Different. It could be different for different people. Like I don't know why. Sometimes a person needs a practical game plan. Sometimes a person is this. Sometimes there could be a lot of factors. But if you feel that you're connected to your worth, and if you after this talk or while we're talking, reflect upon it, journal on it, think about it, go deeper within yourself, think inwardly about yourself, be real, authentic, and honest with yourself. And if you discover that you're doing life on the level of shame, that shame is keeping you to them, that would be your answer. But if you do a self-inventory and you look honest, authentically, and real within yourself, and you say, no, that's not the answer, maybe you're just doing things wrong. Again, I don't know you exactly to really assess and tease out, but I would say that as a guideline, but I would say about the feeling of shame is very subtle. It's not always this big, right? In addictions is talking about shame. The shame keeps a person in the addictive cycle, and so many different areas talk about shame, but often it's very subtle. It's not necessarily this overt. Sometimes it can be overt, of course, that's for sure, but trying to address also the subtle feelings of shame, the of being vulnerable in those phases, in being vulnerable in that space, you know, because overt shame, it's like you feel it. It's very strong, you know, but the subtleties would be about being vulnerable and putting down the defense mechanisms, you know, to really connect with other people during this time, you know.
Sorry, let's do maybe one more question, and then we'll bring it to a close. All right.
Sure.
Question. I don't know, Daniel, but like someone watching this who's hasn't found their shidduch yet, right? So I you could consider yourself worthy and successful, but that might not be enough for what I need in the place I'm currently at.
Like I want to just address what you were saying. Like, I'll be successful when I get married, right? Like, you're successful now, right? The idea that we always have to be proving our worth to ourselves, right? It's not to other people, right? To ourselves, we need to prove our worth, right? That's shame, because we're embarrassed of ourselves. That is right. That's the shame. I'm embarrassed of myself, you know, because I thought I would be already and it didn't happen yet. And right, a lot of different valid, true reasons, you know. But this thing of I'll be successful when, right? And if the answer is I'll be married, or it's different for different people again, you know, you're successful now, right? Allow your worth to work towards, allow your worth to swell from within your deeper nature, right? Yeah, there's 2 or 3 ways you can reach out to me. One is I'm on Instagram. Hit that subscribe, push that like, forward to a friend. Just joking. Hey, I'm on Instagram. You could see me there. And you can go to my website, or you can email me, office@shayasussman.com. And we could take it from there, or whatever it is, or you could get my number from Rav Matt if you want also. That works. Instagram or email, office@shayasussman.com, are fine ways.
Great. Shaya, thank you so much. Everybody here, thank you so much. We really appreciate, coming out and making these events as great as they are. It really encourages us to do it more. So please, I always say this, GamZuli, we are a growing platform. Our success is very much about you, and the more people that you can find, the more people that you can get to join GamZuli, the better of a platform we can have for everybody.